Whistler. Super excited to be playing 25, 50, 100 tonight, although I am expecting a straddle to 200. So it's going to be a big game. Going to see 50K swings, very common in this game. So I'm really excited. I did a lot of studying and really prepped for how to play in this spot and feel really confident. I love playing on the stream. I think the pressure of everyone watching and having to rise to that level to be able to perform my best is really, really compelling to me. It's really exciting. I know for some people this would make them nervous, but for me it's just the most exciting thing I could think about in poker. And I think more than the size of the game, the stage of the game really has a big impact in the energy and overall the level to which you have to rise to in order to play, especially in today's world with social media. So I'm really excited for that. And I'll break down all the hands. Stay right here. Subscribe to the channel. Awesome content is coming. And let's go. Poker starts now. So this first hand kicks off. We're playing 25, 50, 100 with 100 dead and a 200 straddle. I had originally bought in 20K without the 200 straddle, which was pretty deep. But now with the 200 straddle, I lost a few thousand and then I had to rebuy. So I actually had some chips. Mike X, who I've never played with before, opens 600 here in early position. And with my newly added chips, I put them to work. I don't really like flatting here just because there's so many players behind me and they're so loose and aggressive that I feel like I'm going to see a 3-bet often, and I'm not really going to see a flop that often if I get 3-bet. So I decide this hand's probably better to just fold or 3-bet myself, and I decided to go ahead and 3-bet here, get in the action. Didn't come all this way to fold. I make it 2,400, pretty solid 3-bet here. I want to make it big enough that he doesn't just have an insta call. Like if I make it 1,800 or 1,500, 1,800, he's just going to call with everything. I actually want my 3-bet to get through some of the time if he has some offsuit hand, so I go a little bigger. Nik Airball casually calls with 9s. Mike X calls as well. Let's take a flop. Flop comes ace, 10, 5, and someone actually folded an ace, and Nik Airball caught it and exposed that someone had folded the ace of clubs. So that's pretty interesting here because it's a lot less likely that Nik Airball was flatting pre-flop with a hand like ace queen or ace jack or ace king even, and it's much more likely Nik Airball has a hand like a weak pair that cold called a raise and a 3-bet. Those hands are all going to fold the flop. Mike X as well acknowledged he saw the ace. He's probably not calling with an ace in his hand. Therefore, it's really not likely that someone has top pair. Of course, I could be up against 3 10s, but it's really the only thing I'm super worried about at this point. I can still, of course, have all of the strong aces because I 3-bet pre, not knowing that someone had folded an ace, whereas the other players called knowing that someone had folded an ace, making them less likely to have one. Normally in this spot, facing these two actions with loose players, I might not even c-bet here, but having pretty much no equity and knowing that tidbit of information that we all knew at the table, I feel like this is a good spot to c-bet. So I go ahead and make it 2,400, just hoping Nik Airball folds exactly what he has, and that Mike X has something that might call once, but not call twice. I'm actually not that worried if he calls the flop here with a hand like a 10 or even king queen or king jack, just because I have future plans. Turn comes a 3, and there's a lot of cards I'm going to pick up equity on, maybe a 8, a 9, a 4, a 3, a club, are all going to give me more equity that I could barrel, but I'm not even that worried about having more equity. I'm more just concerned about, does Mike X have a hand that he can call 2 bets with? Again, my lane range looks pretty strong. His actually looks quite weak, unless I'm up against 3 10s, in which case, he's going to win the money. He checks, and I didn't come this far to fold, so I go ahead and take a stab of 8,000. Mike tanks for a second, that gets the job done, and I win my first nice pot. This next hand comes up literally one hand after the hand I just 3-bet with 7-6. Mike X opens here under the gun +1 to, again, 600. And I had flatted earlier with a hand that I folded facing a 3-bet behind me. And I had just 3-bet Mike X. I felt like if I 3-bet again here, it's going to look pretty strong. And I feel like calling actually looks really weak. And again, you make money in poker by having your hand look like the opposite of what it is. So I felt like my call looked weak. I'm likely to get one of these people to 3-bet behind me. They were pretty trigger happy here. And so my plan was just to call, take a risk, and trap. Charles takes the bait. He makes it 2,300. I'm loving it because I still have Mike X behind. Maybe he's going to 4-bet. With a hand like ace queen, I think it really could go either way here. I really wouldn't mind this hand being played as a 4-bet to force me out of the pot. And Charles, who can have a very wide range of hands, this hand actually plays pretty well as a 4-bet. He opts to call, which I still like because, of course, I have 2 kings. And my back raise is going to look pretty fishy, I think, at this point, especially when Charles has a wide range, Mike X has dead money call. It looks like I could be up to something. With my 32,000 stack, I go ahead and think for a second and pile in 8,800. I like this size because it's a size that Charles could just call or Mike X could call, which I really don't mind. If one of them calls, the pot's about 20,000. I'm going to have about 20,000 behind. I could easily get my chips in post-flop. At the same time, it's small enough that Charles could make a move. That's what he does. He immediately piles in his entire stack. Mike X tanks, doesn't look that happy. I recheck my cards and have a pretty damn easy call here with 2 kings. We decide to go twice. Nik airballs and convinced I'm going to get scooped or chop at best, but the cards hold up, which I'm very pleased to see, and I win myself a nice pot. I'm up about 35, 40,000 at this point early on in the session. The next interesting hand comes with Nik Airball raising in the hijack to 500. He'd been very active during the session. I had 3-bet him once or twice before. I looked down at ace king on the button. Certainly good enough for a 3-bet. I'm actually hoping that he maybe gets out of line here and gets fed up, sees me 3-bet one too many times and decides to 4-bet. I make it 1,600. I don't expect him to ever fold, but at the same time, it's a small enough size where he could actually get out of line and go for a 4-bet. Kitty picks up ace-10, decides to make a disciplined fold. Mariano has 2 jacks in the big straddle, which I think is a pretty clear 4-bet here. I'd been 3-betting quite wide, and Nik airball's obviously up to no good quite often, so he decides to make a 4-bet. Goes a little bit on the smaller side for a cold 4-bet here. We are very deep, and so it's a little bit smaller, but definitely fine. He makes it 4,400 with jacks. Mariano, solid pro and poker streamer, so expect him to have maybe sometimes out of line here, but most of the time having a pretty damn good hand, knowing that he's up against Nik Airball and me. Airball frustratingly folds 2 offsuit cards, which is not as painful as it seems. But over back to me, and I have ace king. Now, obviously, here I'm not going to be folding my ace king. The question is just, do I want to have a 5-betting range, and do I want to decide to make it something like 11,000 and basically put him to a test, or just flat call and play the pot post flop? I like flat calling here. I like having some strong hands that I can flat call with, and I also like keeping my position. Whereas if I open the door again with a raise and then he jams, I don't really know what to do. Like, am I happy that he jams? Not really. And at the same time, I don't want to raise and then fold my ace king. And I also want to be flatting a 4-bet here with some other hands that are worse than ace king. Like, I'm not only going to have ace king here and flat, or aces or kings. Sometimes I'm going to have worse hands, and it's good to have strong hands to protect my range. Flop comes down pretty damn good for me. Not much more that I could ask for when I call with ace king to flop top pair with top kicker and the backdoor nut flush draw. Mariano checks, which I take to mean that he has pretty much exactly what he has. I would think most of the time that he has air, he's going to bet, so I don't think it's air. I think a lot of times here, it's really 10s, jacks, queens, and kings. Less likely kings because I have a king in my hand, but one of these types of hands that is pretty much, I would say, 10s, jacks, or queens, leaning towards jacks and queens. He checks, and I think here I have a pretty clear bet. I mean, I could check behind, but if I think he has jacks or queens, like, why am I going to check? Maybe an overcard comes on the turn, maybe a heart comes, maybe like a card like a 10 comes, and it kind of kills some action with his queens or jacks. I feel like he's never going to fold the 1 bet here if he has jacks, and nor should he. So why am I going to be checking? I decide to fire 4,000, and Mariano has a very clear call with jacks. The turn comes the interesting queen of hearts, and Mariano checks again. Now, it's possible that he had something like ace-queen and just decides to slow play on the flop. Also, queens is a very possible hand. I mean, we talked about his range being jacks, queens, 10s, kings on the flop, and queens is possible. The real problem with this card is that it's really hard for me to get a lot of action. If he has kings, he never has the king of hearts because I have that. And if he has jacks, you know, half the time he doesn't have a heart, 10s the same. Is he really going to call the turn with jacks with a heart? So it's like one of those spots where I don't get called by that many worse hands. And if he does have queens or ace queen or was trapping with 9s or aces, then I'm really toast. So I think it's hard to get a lot of value. And we have really awkward stacks for me to bet. If I bet and he jams, it really sucks. So I decided to just go ahead and check back here. And I think this is good because a lot of times if the river comes a heart and he has black jacks, black 10s, black kings, he might decide to bet and get me to fold an ace to turn his hand into a bluff. So I actually am really not worried about that many bad rivers, except of course a 10, which is a pretty damn bad river. Because now at this point I really only beat jacks or kings, or maybe he was cold 4-betting with something like ace 5. But that would be the one case for me to value bet if he had something specifically like ace 5. He checks again here, and I could argue for some thin value. It really does suck if he turned or river to set and decides to go for a check raise. And the question is, like, is he really going to call me with something like ace 5, which I think is my real best case scenario? Maybe ace jack. But I just don't have that many bluffs here. I mean, a lot of the hands that I flatted the pre-flop with, bet the flop, and then check the turn, they picked up some sort of equity. So I don't need to bluff with that many hands. And I decide to play it slow, go for a check. He turns over jacks. I really don't feel like I missed any value here. I'm not getting called by jacks here on this river. And I take down a nice pot. Now, nearing the end of the stream, about 4 hours in, next hand comes up, Nik Airball in the hijack. He had been the loosest player by far at the table. Opens to 500. I get a little frisky with King 6 of diamonds. Obviously, from a game theory standpoint, you could just fold this hand. But I'm on stream, here to have fun, and it's Nik Airball. He's playing any 2 cards. I go ahead and 3-bet here up to 1,600. And this hand gets folded back around. And Mariano here with a cold call in the big blind with 7s. And then Nik Airball says, I should fold this hand, and then calls. I feel like he's really being genuine here. I don't feel like he's saying that with like ace-queen. So that actually plays into my decision post-flop, but I really do think he's being genuine. Flop gets checked around to me. I think Mariano a lot of the time is cold calling here with hands that are under pairs, like exactly what he has, 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s. All those hands are going to fold. Nik Airball, when he kind of acts the way he does and says, I don't think I should call here, I don't think he really has any Broadway hands. He's never going to do that with like King 10 suited or Queen Jack. Like those hands he's not going to say that with. I think he has some sort of like random Queen 7 suited type of hand that he knows he should fold but called anyway. I actually didn't even put him on ace deuce, which I think is a pretty clear call here. So I was actually surprised to see him have that hand. But either way, I normally wouldn't see bet this flop, but given the things we just discussed, I go ahead and make a small bet. I do have a gut shot as well and king high. Mariano gets out of the way like I expected, and Airball immediately calls. So at this point, I'm thinking Airball has some sort of weak, random trash hand, maybe like a jack 9 of clubs or queen 8 of clubs or something like that with like a pair and a back door. Maybe he does have some ace 5 offsuits, something like that, but don't think he has much. Turns a deuce, which of course he has 2 pair, but I can't know that. I think that this turn is pretty good because it doesn't ever improve his hand, unless of course he specifically has ace deuce. So he goes ahead and checks. I can still have an uncapped range of all the strong hands. I can have ace queen, ace jack, ace king, pocket aces, pocket queens, pocket jacks. Nik really can't have any of those hands, so I think it's appropriate here to keep firing. I know he's loose and likes to call, but at the same time, I mean, I pretty much have all the strong hands and not a ton of bluffs, and Nik has none of the strong hands and a lot of weak hands. So if those two things are ever in line in a poker game and you're not betting, you're in the wrong game. So I go ahead and fire here. I decided to make a pretty big bet of 6,000. If I do have a strong hand at this point, like any of the hands I just mentioned, all those hands are going to want to bet pretty big and apply a lot of pressure on Nik. He goes ahead and calls very quickly. Again, I did not put him on ace deuce here. He casually called and kind of confused me. I feel like a lot of times here he's going to have something like Jack X of clubs, Queen X of clubs. Those are his most likely hands, I think, at this point. Maybe like King. I don't even think it's King Queen of clubs. I think that hand would not play this way pre-flop, like we said. So I think it's mostly like Jack 9 of clubs. So he goes ahead and calls again. I'm really not worried at this point. It's very hard for me to put him on ace deuce. If he does have an ace, I think a lot of the aces are like ace 4, ace 3, ace 6, ace 7, ace 8, weaker aces that are all going to be folding to another river bet. He goes ahead and checks. At this point, I came this far, hard to give up. I'm just trying to think at this point, like, what size looks the most strong. I could, of course, go for an overbet, but then if I overbet, I'm really making my range look completely polar, and I'm not really overbetting with hands like ace king or ace 10, and I want to keep those hands in my betting range because the smaller I bet, the more value hands I have. The bigger I bet, I'm either at a point where I have 2 pair or air, and I don't want to make my range that polar. I want to make it seem like I for him to call. So also, if he has a hand like Jack X of clubs, I don't need to bet 30,000 for him to fold. I can bet 12,000 he's going to fold Jack X of clubs because he has Jack X of clubs. So I bet something like 12, 13,000. Of course, with ace deuce, I can't put him on that, but he has a snap call. I really would have loved to see what would have happened if the turn was a 3 and he had ace deuce. If he called me with just 1 pair, like a dry ace, obviously my bet is terrible, but it's hard to know in retrospect if this was a good play or not. Obviously, I'd love to hear your thoughts in a comment below. Let me know if this was a good bluff or not. These last 2 hands are super interesting. Before we get into it, I want to thank everyone for their amazing support and encourage you guys to subscribe to this channel. I will be doing future giveaways like I did for this last debut appearance on The Hustler, where I give away a free $1,000 membership to Conscious Poker, and that's going to be for people that guess my results. So be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, just at Alec Torelli. Beware of scammers, of people impersonating me, and I will continue to do awesome things to engage you guys, and thank you for your support and attention. Also, visit consciouspoker.com for more awesome free content. We send out a free newsletter twice a week to help people like you take your game to the next level. Let's go back to the video. This next hand comes up. I make it 800 with king queen. Charles, who had been incredibly loose and very aggressive, obviously you saw the sevens hand not too long ago, makes it 4,000. At this point here, I frankly, I'm really trying not to be results oriented. I genuinely feel like he had a really strong hand, which affects my decision post flop. I feel like I should have just folded here because my read was that he's strong, and king queen against a strong hand doesn't play that well. But then I got caught up with this idea of like, oh, it's Charles, I have to call because he can have any two. So I kind of leveled myself here. I feel like I should have just folded pre. Anyway, I go ahead and make the call, and we go heads up to a flop. Flop comes down pretty damn good for me, or at least I think so. Flop top pair, obviously, always happy to flop top pair. Queen, jack, deuce. I check. Charles asks how much I have, and instantly goes all in. So he bets 40,000 into 8,000. I'm just going to consider that like a 5x overbet. Let's just call it basically what it is. So at this point, I'm like, what types of hands does he overbet here with? Of course, he could have something like, just 10-9 or maybe king-10. Maybe he has ace-king, or he obviously could have something like ace-queen, kings, or aces. I don't really think this is ever a set. I don't think this is ever a set of jacks. But look at this table talk here, and let me know what you guys think.
Okay, I'll give you an offer. So, 5K for one card.
It doesn't help me that much.
All right.
But thank you. I appreciate that. That's very kind.
Thank you. You can see my hand.
Wow. That's fair. You're very kind. I appreciate it. Thank you. You're trying. 5K. I can pick the card, or you pick the card.
You pick the card.
I can pick either one.
So I tank for a while, and he gives me this table talk speech. And again, my read was that he was strong pre-flop. But when he says you can pick one card, I don't feel like he ever has a card below a 10 in his hand. Because if he shows me a 10 or a 9, he knows I'm going to call because I have top pair or mid pair, right? And if he has a 10 in his hand, I have him dead. I have the best hand, right? So I don't have him dead, but I have the best hand. So I feel like at this point, his range is always aces, kings, ace, queen, or ace king, because he's never going to say C1 card without an ace or a king in his hand. So at this point, I'm up against aces, kings, ace king, and ace queen, and I think my equity against that range is not very good. I also don't think ace king bluffs 100% of the time here, whereas I think aces or kings or ace queen are much more likely to jam here. So I think he's more likely to have those strong hands than the weaker hands, but either way, I need 50% equity. Against aces or kings, I'm pretty much dead, and against ace king, yes, I have the best hand, but he still has 28% equity. So it's a spot where I'm either, a little bit ahead of the equity I need to call, or I'm drawing dead and way behind. Of course, it's easier in retrospect. He did do some table talk and act kind of weak. Maybe I should have been able to sniff this out. I'd love to hear your thoughts in a comment below. Should I have called here, even though he 5x overbet the flop? Should I have sniffed this out and called? Leave your thoughts in a comment below. Let me know what I could have done different.
All right, Charles.
He lets it go.
I go ahead and tank fold. He, of course, shows me the bad news, or the good news for him. The bad news, I offer him a cookie, which was an ongoing joke in the game. I brought cookies from one of my favorite bakeries because it was Christmas and I wanted to bring something nice for everyone. And every time after someone would lose a pot, I was offering a cookie to make them feel better. But actually, it was really tilting everyone because I was like, hey, you want a cookie? And they were like, what the fuck, dude? That's so annoying. So I decided to offer him a cookie when he won the pot as a joke. He took it well, and it was a fun hand. And unfortunately, I was at the wrong side of it. All right, last hand of the night. The stream is about to end, and I'm about even at this point. Maybe I'm up like 5K. Only a 5-hour stream, so not terribly eventful here. I decided to raise the button to 500 with king 7 off, and probably one of the worst hands I'm going to be raising here with. I do have like 4 or 5 people behind me, but I'm not getting 3-bet that much from these players. They typically like to call more than raise, so fine spot to open, I think. Rainbow Kitty had decided to call, and Mariano defended the big blind as well. Flop comes down 7-4 deuce. Great flop for me. Obviously, one of the best flops you could ask for. Top pair. Mariano leads here. Some small $500 lead, 1/3 pot. And this is a good spot for me to raise. Obviously, I want some protection. I think a lot of his leads are going to be hands like weak pairs. Maybe like a worse 7, 5, 6s, a 4. Maybe he has some bluffs as well. But overall, I think I'm going to have the best hand most of the time. And to protect some of the bluffs I'm raising with, I definitely want to raise for value with some top pair. I also want Rainbow Kitty to fold too. I don't want him to overcall with some equity and just peel his equity and get in for a cheap amount on the flop. So I like raising here. I think Mariano's going to call with a lot of his 7s, as he should, and I could go ahead and start getting some value right away from my hand. So back over to Rainbow Kitty, who obviously has a set. He's not going anywhere. He decides to make this cold 3-bet on the flop, and Mariano, of course, gets out of the way with just a top pair here facing uncapped ranges from me and Kitty behind has a very clear fold. So he gets out of the way. Back over to me here, and this is really like kind of a turning point in the hand. I kind of have to decide like what I want to do here. First of all, I'd like you guys to think about and leave your thoughts in a comment below. What types of hands is he re-raising the flop here with? It's easy to say, oh, I should just fold top pair here, but actually, in a weird, perverse sort of way, having a 7 is better than having pocket 10s because he's never raising this flop with hands in between those ranges. I don't think. I think if he had pocket 8s, he's just going to flat here. But having a 7 is actually good because I block 7-4, which I don't think he has that often because he called with someone behind him pre-flop, but I block pocket 7s. Whereas if I have pocket 9s, it's a better hand than king 7, but I don't block 7s. So there's more combos of sets that he can have. Whereas right now, his only real value hands, in my opinion, are pocket 2s, pocket 4s, pocket 7s. There's only 7 combos of those hands, and I beat all of his other bluffs. So if he has something like 5-6 or ace-5 or ace-3 or diamonds or 8-6, or he's just getting out of line, something a little frisky, I beat all of those hands. So in my thought here is like, I'm dead against all the sets, but I'm ahead against all these bluffs. I don't want to jam now or raise because if he does have one of those draws, I don't want to get it in against a combo draw. That's terrible for me on the flop. So my plan was to flat and then take one card off and see what happens on the turn. Obviously, if the turn comes an 8 or a diamond or an ace, I can just fold. But if the turn comes a blank, I'm going to reevaluate and see how the things go. I'd like your thoughts in a comment below. I go ahead and call. In retrospect, I could just fold the flop here because there are quite a few turns where I might get bluffed. I'm not sure if he's going to slow down. Maybe he's going to bluff again on a queen turn if he has a diamond draw, and then what am I going to do? Right? So it's kind of a tough spot for me. I have 30,000 left. The pot's 15,000. I have an awkward sort of chip stack as well. I kind of wish I had less. I could just stick it in on the flop. But I do have an awkward sort of stack. It's really hard for me to jam the flop here with just top pair. It's not a great spot for me, of course. He goes ahead and bets 15,000 full pot. So now I have like this, committed decision, and I basically have to jam or fold. In this spot, I feel like this is actually one of the best turns for me. I don't think he really ever has a jack, unless he has like ace jack of diamonds specifically, which if he does, good for him. But at this point, all of his other combo draws, I'm now way ahead of, right? Even if he has 15 outs, I'm still a big favorite, right? There's 45 unseen cards or something like that, and I have he could only win with 15, so I'm a big favorite. Most of the time, I'm going to win. So it's a big difference him having a combo draw with 2 to go versus a combo draw with 1 to go. Again, the only hands I'm really worried about at this point that beat me are specifically those few combos of sets. So there's 7 combos of sets that beat me, sure, but all the other hands I feel like I'm ahead of. Of course, it's easier when we could see the cards. It's not a great spot for me. I kind of made my decision on the flop that I was going to look for a blank turn. This is pretty much as blank as it gets given the action. Again, he really can't have a jack here given the fact that he cold 3-bet the flop. I could maybe fold on something like a 6 or maybe something like an 8. But at this point, I decided to stick it in. Of course, I'm drawing absolutely dead. So I think it's appropriate at this point to say, if you want to learn to hand read like me, go to consciouspoker.com, download my free hand reading system. I'll teach you how to stick all your money in drawing absolutely dead in $73,000 pots. It's totally free. So check it out, consciouspoker.com. Anyway, I get shown the bad news. I do offer him a cookie after the hand. He decides to take one for the first time all night, which I thought was very funny because he didn't want a cookie all night. Wins a $70,000 pot. He's super happy, takes a cookie. I was very happy that someone wanted my cookies, and I felt a little bit better about that. Overall, though, I did lose $36,200, but I guess I'm as happy as you can be for losing that amount. I had a great time with cool people, and I got to do something I love, and playing on the big stage on camera. It's super fun for me. It's exhilarating. It brings out that level of competition that you don't have in cash games, especially just going to the casino or playing in a home game. So this was super cool. I'm really grateful for the opportunity, and I had fun with a lot of cool people. So I'll be back soon, and thanks for your support. Subscribe to this channel. Awesome content's coming, and thank you so much for all your kind messages on social. You guys are amazing, and I'll see you in the next one.